And then if you wouldn't mind, it's going to show up in presentation mode when.
Yeah, I'll shrink all this stuff down.
Oh no! Once you're in the presentation, there's a little thing to make it mirror on both sides.
Oh, do you know how to do that?
Yeah. So if I hit F5, and then once it gets into the presentation.
Let's see. Not sure.
You're there actually on the screen behind.
You've got one presentation behind you, but not
That's
the other
fine.
mirror. Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. The real problem that we need to solve as a people is teleconferencing and meeting solutions. You think about, as I was saying, I think that the real opportunity right now in virtual reality and augmented reality is one on the content side, because there are a sufficient amount of platforms and hardware available to do some really impressive things. But where Apple, Google, ODG, Magic Leap, HoloLens, everyone is suffering is on leveraging those technologies for applications. And so when we think about what we're doing with the lab, we think about it in the context of creating content using emerging technologies. And I'll get into sort of what that means and ultimately how we go about doing that. There are really three things that are our central focus for the lab. The first one is industry collaboration. And so we've taken a cue from the MIT Media Lab, and I think what we've seen from them is something that's really impressive, is the ability to use industry to help drive innovation and create a bridge with academia. And their focus is really, really broad in terms of everything from data science to medicine to understanding social dynamics and networking effects. We're really looking at it from the standpoint of emerging technologies and content creation. But what we love about them, and one of the things that I use them as an example for, is establishing that industry connection, that bridge to help drive what the lab is doing, where we focus our efforts, and how we can introduce faculty and students to industry and get that really sort of applicable experience, and also contribute to what's happening in the industry real time. And this can take the form of all the things you see up here, really: R&D project execution, research projects, them coming in and using our facility behind closed doors to do something R&D, and thinking about it in the context of them just getting out of their home environment and really sinking their teeth into a problem. Or it can be things that are really highly collaborative, where we do things on their behalf or alongside them. Just by way of some examples, we're in the process of kicking off a project right now with Unity. And for those who don't know Unity, I imagine most of you in the room do. It's really middleware technology that enables game creation and the ability to create shortcuts for producing things like physics engines and cross-platform deployments of gaming. But what they are fundamentally is a library of resources and tools for a developer to use to do really powerful things in a very simple way. And so as we bring our facilities online, some of the things that we're looking at is establishing, and I'll show you what it looks like in a little bit, a motion capture environment. And that motion capture environment, Unity would like to use to be able to create a library of assets. And so when you think about motion capture and capturing human movement, you're really just collecting data points, right? And so if we can record 50 people walking or 100 people walking, then what we can do is recreate Times Square by reskinning each one of those people as individual data points, creating a sense of randomness. Now, Unity would like to have this library that they can provide to their large population of developers, of somebody sitting around smoking a cigarette, typing on a computer, two people interacting with each other, somebody walking, somebody jumping, and that way those data points can be plugged into a gaming environment and be reskinned for whoever is developing to meet that developer's needs. And that's just to give you an example of one industry partnership.
But that's dependent on having a common skeleton for those characters. So are they deciding on some universal rig for their characters in Unity, or?
Yeah, so we're still figuring out really, I think what we're going to try to do is have a diverse group of people, because lots of people have different shapes and sizes. But what we want to do, to your point, is create, we want one person to do a whole bunch of different behaviors, and then do that with several different people. So we have sort of sizes and shapes that account for a representative sample of the people out there. It's not going to be perfect, but it's a starting point and it's a pilot for them. So by deploying these 50 or 100 data points, then what we can do is see if there's interest in the community with that as they launch it out on their library, and if there is, then we'll double down and do more.
Are they at all interested? The biomechanics community has been doing motion capture for 40 years, and there's
Right.
tons of, like a million people have been collected during various activities. I mean, we could just reach out to our colleagues and give
Yeah.
them all the data they need.
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of it is they want to own some of the
Yeah.
data. I think that's a big part of it for them. And this, again, this is a small scale exploration that they're interested in doing. But as we get the lab online, this is just one small example of what we're looking to do.
I can imagine along those lines, if you want somebody walking with a limp, you want someone walking, these different ways.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or a bird flying, or I mean, there's different animals as well, or a dog walking, or jumping, or chasing a ball. There's a million different ways that you can look at this. Hi there.
Hey.
So the second part of it is we think about is incubating, really, and this is one of the areas I think is really, really interesting, especially talking to you all. When we think about the lab, there's an element of working with industry, but there's also a whole bunch of amazing research that's happening within the University of North Carolina system, from the stuff that Jerry's working on, from the patient experience and IBM Watson to some of the research that's happening at Wake Forest around how you measure fatigue during a baseball player's pitch based on how far they extend themselves and capturing that on motion capture. And based on this, what we want to do is be really a resource across the UNC system, one for equipment and hardware, but also for the content creation and the expertise from the film school of being able to help the research that you're doing tell the story effectively based on what you're working on. And so we think about incubation in a few different ways. One of those is grant-backed research or financially backed research that faculty is doing. Student-based projects. That could mean like a film school student has an idea for a film around racial inequality or a hot issue like the Me Too movement, and then they want to get that project at Tribeca or at Sundance. And with those inroads and those connections that we have, we can help with various aspects of that, ranging from ideation to production to distribution. It also could mean taking some ideas that have started with research and started with an idea and that have morphed into a company. And so with my background in the startup world and friends in the investor community, we can also serve as a springboard when somebody wants to take a one-off project or a finite project and take that to the next level and help them turn that into a functioning, continuous company. The third thing is through what we think of as thought leadership. So this is going to take the form of a few different things, but what we're seeing in North Carolina specifically is we're seeing a bit of a brain drain. There's a lot of people who come here for a world-class education, getting their PhDs and then leaving the state. And what we want to do is create almost a magnetic effect of bringing people here, keeping them here and retaining them here. And also taking the people that are already here along for the ride with us. So that means hosting events and really positioning ourselves as a thought leader. And as a thought leader, what we would look to do is offer community courses for people to learn how to code. And there are a lot of industries here in North Carolina that are on a decline. And what we can do through really affordable classes is expose people who are in those industries to something new and do it in a very economical and interesting and approachable way. And through that, hopefully drive some economic development. We're in the very early stages of this right now. And so the opportunities are there, but the amount of impact we can make we'll really start to see once we start deploying these programs. That also means establishing an experience center. So we're looking to put an experience center in downtown Winston-Salem that will have a wide range of experiences that include location-based experiences, where you put on a full unit and you walk around in a virtual space, but everything you touch and feel is actually there. And some of this can be fun and interesting, or if you've heard of the hero experience, that's been really the rage for this year. It's a very empathetic experience about a person's journey as they walk down the streets of Syria. And so there could be really powerful, interesting pieces that are education-driven, empathy-driven, or simple art installations that we can offer there to, one, expose people to what's possible, but also use this space as a hub for doing classes and these thought leadership events. So I think really what I'm trying to convey with this slide is, it takes a village to raise the baby. And so there's a lot going on here that's going to make it, help make us successful. And a lot of it is the folks in this room. I'm new to North Carolina. I just moved here a few months ago. And what's interesting about North Carolina is there is so much talent, and there's so many pockets of interesting things going on from an augmented reality and virtual reality standpoint, some of which I find way more interesting than what's going on in the Valley. But it's harder for me to find. And I rely on Brian, who's been amazing, and Michael, who's been amazing, and some of you, I'm sure I'll be bugging now and again to ask you who I should talk to and who I should get to know, because it's not as in your face or apparent as it is in the Valley, but the still waters run very deep, and so that's been really amazing. But in addition to that, we think about how we can bankroll these projects, the investor community. We think about it like the NC ecosystem for universities. We're doing some projects with Wake Forest, we're doing some projects with Chapel Hill here, and we're looking to add a few more universities and really sort of create this Swiss Army knife, so to speak, of capabilities, because at the School of the Arts, we don't have it all, and to be able to leverage the things that the various universities in the system do well is going to really help this lab be successful. We really want to think of this lab as really a tool and a resource for the entire University of North Carolina system. So where are we today? Right now we have a facility that's 60 feet by 60 feet by 60 feet. We call it the Cube, and it's at the Center for Design Innovation in Winston-Salem. Right now in that space is a 20 by 20 motion capture setup, and actually on this side. And then we also have a fully functioning back lot for production at the School of the Arts that we have access to and are able to use as part of the lab. Now, we can do a lot of interesting things around green screen and 360 video there, and we're in the process of upgrading this facility to basically go from being a baseline environment to being something that is on par with what's happening in Hollywood and in major production studios around the world. And we're talking to a lot of the folks at those production studios to make sure that we're on par. So one, the people who are using the facility have access to the latest and greatest, but also so the students who are in the film school are most ready for going out into industry. And so we want to really serve multiple purposes there. Where we look to get to, and this is a rendering of ultimately what we're in the process of building out now. So with our 20 by 20 motion capture space, we're going to expand that to roughly be 30 by roughly around 50. And then we'll have a fully functioning green screen that's much larger and can accommodate a lot more interesting shots and footage capture. The way this is designed, it can also support location-based entertainment, which basically means you have to have another beam of motion capture sensors or cameras along the top to be able to capture if you were to put somebody into like a maze-like environment to know where they are at all times. Any questions about that?
What kind of resolution are you expecting on the motion capture?
Great question. So we were just on the phone with Vicon and OptiTrack to price out the system based on what we can afford versus what we really, really want. And so what we're looking at roughly, I think we're trying to get to a place where we're at 8K. Now they go up to 12K with Vicon, but on a per camera basis, it's pretty costly. And so what we're most likely going to do is we'll have a higher density camera system over here and a lower density camera system over here. So that way we can get some bleed over from coming this way and also coming that way. That way we can manage our costs and keep them in a place where we can afford them. Well, we've gotten Vicon hopefully to a place where they'll be able to do it for a below market rate cost because we are an academic institution. So that means we can go a little bit further in terms of capability. But we do want to make sure that we're future-proofing it to some extent and not going with the lowest common denominator.
Ryan, you're talking about gross movement rather than fine movement, like facial expression or surgery or manipulation.
Yeah, so mainly gross movement, but what you'll find, I think, what we're seeing so far is on hand and face in particular, it makes sense to have a separate setup for that. There is, based on this, the size of the scaffolding, if we'd have to do, it'd be more costly to do those fine movements from afar than if we were to just put a helmet on somebody and have an Andy Serkis type of rig set up to capture those fine face movements. From a distance, you can also do the lobster hands, so you can get the 3 fingers, but to get full hands, we would have to do something special as well. So part of what we're doing is establishing membership programs, and there's 2 types of membership, and I won't spend a tremendous amount of time on this, but I really want to just make you aware of it. One of those is we think of as corporate membership, and the other one is individual membership. And again, modeled after the MIT Media Lab, and also what we find that based on our feedback from talking with everyone from Unity to NBC to Technicolor, this is a way that works really, really well for them. But and what we look to do really from a corporate membership standpoint is think about it in the context of how can we deliver a return on investment right away. And so that takes the form initially of doing a project with them. And we try to, within the first year of their membership, kick off a project that is something in their interest and that's something that is within our wheelhouse. And we really work closely with the corporate members to be able to identify what that should be, what the ultimate end result is and the value they're trying to get out of it, and then sort of craft a project plan around that. We haven't established any members yet, we're just getting the lab off the ground, but we're in advanced conversations with several large corporations. On the individual side, we think about it really in the context of staying in the loop, staying engaged, and it's priced accordingly. I mean, on the highest tier, you think about it, if you're an industry executive, you need a meeting space, or you want to be able to recruit from the interns or universities that we partner with, we create special inroads that are at that appropriate price tier. But that ranges all the way down to student and faculty memberships, which are free or at cost, really. And really the goal here is to stay plugged into what we're doing, be able to attend events, have exclusive access from the general public, because a lot of the events we'll do are for the general public as well. But we really want to create sort of that ecosystem and network for projects and for people who want to work in this space and be involved in what the lab is doing and contribute to that. These are a list of the conversations we have in play right now. So these range everything from acquiring equipment and trying to get that as a donation or at cost to kicking off a variety of projects and partnerships. And I think from our perspective, we've already been named a next-gen campus from Oculus, and Oculus is giving us a lot of equipment so far. And we're working with across the board to, like, for example, Tribeca Film Festival. We're in talks to do a content creation hackathon in the fall with them, where all the students and faculty who want to participate choose a topic, something that is important to the group that's here, something that is important to the region, and spend a weekend building that out. And based on how that goes, then Tribeca Film Institute and other investors may dump money into that, which would ultimately result in it being exhibited at next year's Tribeca Film Festival. So when we think about content partnerships, they really fall into one of 3 buckets. One of those is hardware, software enablement. The other one is content creation, like Starbreeze Studios. They're the ones that made that hero experience I was telling you about earlier. And then we think about it in terms of distribution. And so that's really the ecosystem or food chain that we're trying to establish through the membership. And as people work within the lab, we want to make that available to folks like yourselves who are doing really interesting things and can hopefully leverage this network to increase your distribution or get access to hardware and software or get access to talent that helps you get your own projects over the line. So I think this is my last slide. And so really what I wanted to just touch on is, since I'm meeting most of you for the first time, are some ways that we can hopefully collaborate together. And I really wanted to just flag some ways that jumped out to me immediately, and I'm sure there are others that I haven't thought of yet. But I keep a very open door policy, and I'm open to exploring lots of different ways that, that you can think of the lab as a resource, or we can partner and do something really exciting together. The first is content creation projects. The second is simply just using our facility. If you've just received a grant to do some research, and that grant requires you to have a motion capture set up, well, if the grant you've received is $400,000 or $500,000, you don't want to spend $250 on your motion capture setup. And so the idea is, think of us as a resource and something that you can use for your own projects. You can bring your own team in and use, or you could do in partnership together. The second thing is, and we're just starting to get this online. It hasn't been fully flushed out yet, but what we're going to do is start an internship program and an ability for there to be faculty residencies. And this will probably be something we kick off next year. But the idea is we want to keep the production facility staffed with talent at all times and working on a wide range of projects of things that we find interesting, things that are going on generally in the space right now, as well as those projects that come in from corporate members or as part of grants. And then the third thing is showcasing your research. So if you've done work and you need to get it out there, you need to make people aware of it, we want to be able to give you that forum as well through our Experience Center. So depending on what you're working on, there might be a good fit there of exposing that to the public, or leveraging our network to be able to get it into some of the film festivals or conferences that are out there. And we're in the process now of planning our first real, I guess, summit for the lab, which will probably happen in the fall or spring. And we'll bring in some relatively well-known folks from the tech industry, as well as some bloggers and podcasters, and really try to have a day-and-a-half event where we can get really deep on specific topics that range everything from education to enterprise, and our focus on both some keynote speeches as well as some panel discussions, and really would love to explore opportunities where we can create an environment where you can highlight what you're working on and get exposure at some of those events, but also something you can attend and hopefully derive some value from or exhibit your work. And the last thing is the projects with the industry, which I mentioned earlier, which is as those projects come in, and we think about the Unity project, which I mentioned earlier, it's going to take a team of people to deliver on that project in particular. So we don't have all the talent at the School of the Arts. We don't have all the skill sets needed to make this lab successful, and that's why it's really important to me personally to make this to be a resource for the entire system, and also create an opportunity where we can leverage engineering talent from Chapel Hill, leverage medical expertise from the School of Medicine, pull in the content creators from the film school, and or dancers or whatever that expertise is, and really think of the entire university system as a resource for these industry partnerships, and hopefully increase the overall exposure for your own work and the work of the lab. That's me.
Great, thanks. Take questions?
Any questions? Thanks for the great questions, by the way.
So Ryan, you've got a kind of a hybrid business model going on here. On one hand, you're a service bureau, right, so you're providing these capabilities. On the other hand, you mentioned the MIT Media Lab, and those companies there spend a lot of money. And those memberships are like $250,000 a year. That's where they start to get non-exclusive access. So it seems like you're blending those together. Are you getting any money from the state or anything like that, or how's this blended together?
Yeah, so we're in the process now of raising funds, both through memberships and the MIT Media Lab is really a model for us at this point. We hope to reach their level of acclaim at some point, but with a $78 million working budget, we still have a ways to go before we can get there.
That's bigger than the working budget of our whole school.
No, and so in the interim, what we're working on doing is raising funds with the state of North Carolina to help think about it in this short session as a one-time funding request to build out the facilities that we need, all the hardware, the software, and get the lab up and running. We're in the CDI cube right now, which you saw a picture of earlier, but ultimately that's a temporary space for us. And so through the funding we hope to raise, we'll look to move into a more permanent facility that's more set up for what we're trying to achieve. But all of the funds we're looking to raise right now are one-time funds. And so then we have to really think about the reoccurring funds that are important there. So think about that in terms of headcount. We think about that in terms of membership fees and our presence at conferences. And all of those things are a work in progress, as is the one-time funding. We're not over-reliant on that yet by any means. But we're looking at a multifaceted approach to raising funds for this. But the goal is within 3 to 5 years that the lab will be able to sustain itself.
Can I say one other thing about that? Actually, part of Ryan's job is actually determining the business model. So unlike all of the other research institutions in the UNC system, we have no real history that we have to follow. We have no precedent that we have to follow. And so we are being very open-minded about how to make this work. And it provides us with an opportunity to perhaps do things which are over-constrained with universities that have more history or more past. So we are very much looking at, and also because we have never done any of the kind of heavy-duty federal research that creates a tremendous amount of overhead, we also have a sort of an opportunity to do a more lightweight style of contracting with these organizations and potentially present a lower overhead rate, because federal funding is not necessarily, we're much more going after industry and community and not necessarily going after the national scale stuff initially, assuming we can make it work.
And speaking of the media lab, have you thought of leveraging the fact that, you know, Ramesh Raskar is a graduate of UNC and, you know, having him over, or
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I don't know Ramesh personally, but we were actually, before you walked in the room, we were just talking about the notable faculty who are, you could argue, are the forefathers and mothers of virtual reality and augmented reality that are right here in Chapel Hill. And so not only that, but there's a tremendous alumni community. I was meeting with Judd this morning. He was mentioning that the senior managing partner at Sequoia sent both of his daughters to UNC Chapel Hill. So there are so many different connections here of long established research in this space that we're trying to really leverage as many of those as we can, and talking to all those sort of key players who are connected either first degree or second or third degree to North Carolina, or just come here for the first time, or just taken with all the things that are happening here.
And one of the things that's of interest to me is just the way this leads to strange bedfellows in a really good way.
What's that?
Strange bedfellows that something on the one hand is the film school's interested in, but also the med school's interested in. And then also at the Health Sciences Library, our mission is 4 parts. We've got teaching and learning, we've got research, clinical care, and then everything else. And then everything else I include commercialization. And I think that that ARVR space is rich for all of those spaces. You could imagine it in teaching and learning and research and clinical care and in commercialization. How does the lab see that particularly?
Well, we have a couple bumper stickers that we really like. I think our favorite one that Dean Ruskin and I love the most is where you see the technology companies dumping most of their funds right now are in engineering programs. With Facebook and their recent investment in University of Washington, there's some investments at Georgia Tech. And what we like to say is, while they're starting with the head, we're starting with the heart. So really what we think of is in every context, whether that's medical or education or pure entertainment, there's a storytelling aspect to that in terms of the content creation. So for us, what we're looking for as we do our first projects, and right now we've completed one with a faculty member, Stephen King, here at UNC Chapel Hill, for the Shackleton Stuck in the Ice experience, basically creating a graduate school of business program around being able to delegate responsibility and do strategy on the fly and try to keep your crew alive, replicating what Ernest Shackleton went through about 100 years ago. And so that was sort of our first experience in partnership with the lab's experience, in partnership with Chapel Hill, but also as the first experience that we've created. And so what we're looking for in terms of future collaborations are things that align really nicely with the people we're working with and the strengths that we have, but also in terms of establishing an initial portfolio for the lab and something that we can put out into the press, we can generate some buzz about, and also attract some attention about all the good things that are happening here, both from a research perspective and from a lab perspective.
No, I'm curious how that partnership went. So was that a fee for service thing? Because usually, for those of us that are faculty and researchers, what we do is we collect this pilot data that it'll eventually lead us to get the $2-3 million grant here. But in order to get there down the road, we really want to collaborate and do small scale projects that we can afford now, and then sort of move forward into those larger scale things. So I'm just curious how you see
How about with Stephen in particular?
that, if that's the one example that worked out.
Sure, yeah. So in Stephen's case, he covered, so there are costs of really running the production environment, and Stephen covered the costs associated with it. So we did everything on a cost model, basically. So it wasn't free for Stephen by any means, but at the same time, it wasn't like we weren't making money on the situation. So we think about it really more so on how we can create the environment and cover the cost of whatever the facilities are. If we have to rent equipment or have staff there, or filmmakers or students. The common misconception about the film school is what we see is a local business owner will come to us and say, I have a great project for your students. Can you do a commercial for my grocery store? And that's where Dean Russing goes, no, you know what, we can't. The students aren't going to want to do that, and they're not going to spend their weekends working for free. And so it's really making the cost in just a place where it will attract the students and the talent that is needed, but not in a place where we're a not-for-profit at the end of the day.
So what is the staffing for the Cube like? I mean, what kind of people, student staff, how many, what do they do, that kind of stuff?
Right now, it's just me. And so we're in the process now of building out what that looks like. And this is closely tied with funding. So when we do projects, what we do is a combination of recruiting students in the film school, if we need that particular talent, working with engineering programs like the engineering programs here or at NC State or at Wake Forest. And we pull people from all over our network who are both passionate about the project that we're doing and have the right skill sets. And it's sort of a beg, borrow, and steal approach, and very scrappy startup way, which is sort of my background, so I kind of like it. But in the long term, what we hope to reach is a team that can be delivering projects on an ongoing basis that is fully staffed. And that means as we do selected projects with different faculty or with the industry, we can fill their excess time with explorations and interesting projects that are pursuing our own research aims as well. But what that team looks like is a combination of engineers, creative storytellers, and traditional backlot folks like the director of photography, the director itself, and the editing talent. And so because it's a sort of a multifaceted group of people, there are some people we only have to bring in for a few hours here and there, and other people that need to be on staff all the time.
Currently, just out of curiosity, of the projects that you've done with this mishmash of people, what's been the approximate ratio of men to women?
Great question. I think...
So I go to a lot of VR, AR meetings, and the 4 women here are an outstanding percentage relative to most.
It's pervasive. I mean, so I was a startup executive before I was here, and you know, it's tough because there's as much of a pipeline problem. So there's just not a great pool of women who are coming in who are interested or qualified. So when we look to higher engineering talent, we're often in a place where we're trying to build out a very diverse team, but it's just the pool of candidates doesn't support it. With regard to the production process, with the Stephen King project, that one in particular, I think it was probably about 30 or 40% women and about 60 or 70% men, if memory serves. And then if we look at really what we've done in some of our other work, it just kind of varies. We're doing a joint game development course right now with Wake Forest, and that is about 20% women and 30% women. And what's interesting, I mean, we're always conscious of that and trying to remove biases on our side. But what we're also conscious of is we're in a place where the industry as a whole needs to attract more women to STEM-based roles, and hopefully we can do that with some of our projects and get some exposure for what we're doing. What's really interesting, which I was really pleasantly surprised with, at Tribeca Film Festival this year, they had their virtual reality arcade, and I would say that the tables were tipped the other way. Most of the selections that I saw there was probably about 70 or 80% of the content, the people who designed the content and created the whole experience. I would say of everyone I talked to for every single exhibit, it was about 70% women and 30% men. So I'm not sure what they have been able to do in terms of tapping into talent pools, but whatever it is, it's really working, and it's pretty exciting to see.
I wanted to add one thing about the staffing, which is Ryan already mentioned economic development, and there are a number, it's a small number, but there are a number of graduates, both of our School of Design and Production and School of Filmmaking, who choose to stay in the Piedmont area because they know that there's no one perfect place to live between LA, Atlanta, and New York. And so they sit down in Winston-Salem and they do their various professional jobs where that work calls them. But the capability of adding staff, I think this is very quickly going to be not just a UNCSA world. There's going to be a group of people who probably have alumni connections, but are otherwise professionally independent. And that is definitely one of our big missions. And I think that will also ramp up things. I would also say that based on my walkthroughs of the School of Filmmaking and the School of Design and Production, those are about as 50-50 as they get. Right. Whether it's directing, cinematography, carpentry, welding, scenic painting, design, costumes, etc. It's when I probably do 10 tours a year, and I never walk in expecting to see all of one gender or another in any of the roles of those programs.
Definitely.
But to the point about engineering, there is an engineering problem.
Well, in AR, I'm speaking specifically about AR and VR, not just engineering.
But looking at the production support to allow those ARVR things to help, they are going to be very gender diverse production support teams, and so that's going to be very positive.
I think so too. I've been in augmented reality since 2013, virtual reality. And the first event I went to in the space was literally like, I picture it probably as when Steve Jobs went and demoed his first personal computer. I mean, this is like a science fair, and there were people who were really just showcasing something they built in their garage of, hey, look, I've created this fake slam off of one camera, not even stereoscopic, and it stays with the piece of paper. I can move over here, and I can move over here, and it's still there. And to now where you see just large corporations jumping in head and feet and really seeing this as the next medium. And I think for us it's really a matter of when, not if. And it's kind of graduated from that geek phase of a bunch of people just tinkering on projects and interested in it for the sole purpose of being interested in it, to something that has a potential viability that's really exciting.
Is your lab involved, and I'm probably going to use the wrong term, but are you doing any of the 3D video capture of real life? You can
360.
360, thank you.
Yeah, so
That's what I meant to say, actually.
one of the areas that we're
Very
looking
close to what you're saying.
so one of the areas we're looking really closely is at volumetric capture.
That's the word. There you go.
And 6 degrees of freedom, meaning you could, if you're in a VR environment that's been captured, I should be able to peek around this chair and see what's on the other side, as opposed to just sort of being able to look like this and see almost like a light field type of a view, like what light show was doing. So for us, that's really interesting. We're in talks with Intel, who just opened up a massive volumetric capture stage in the LA area, and Microsoft also has stages set up both in Redmond, in San Francisco, and in London. And so volumetric capture in particular is very interesting for us. But we're trying to decide if this is a now or a future thing based on if this is a flash in the pan, or if this is something that has some real potential in the immediate future, because we have limited resources and we have to prioritize.
So I know this is a VR and AR group, but other media and emerging technology that you're really sort of excited about outside of what we've talked about?
I mean, first thing that comes to mind is, it's so cliche at this point, but I'm really interested in blockchain, especially for creatives, because that chain of custody that you can establish through blockchain ensures that creators actually get compensated for the work that they do, and there's a chain of custody there that makes it possible so you can keep track of the distribution of it and it doesn't just disappear into the ether of the web. And so I think in terms of investing in the people who are the storytellers and the creators and the imaginative engineers who have an idea and they want to pursue it, this has the potential to make their idea not just interesting but also lucrative in a way that they're sometimes get abused through going through big studios or big development houses or selling things on the App Store. There's a way that you kind of decentralize a lot of that.
One of the things that I'm excited about is David Eagleman, who's a neuroscientist at Stanford, has this vest that can take any data input and turn it into vibrations on your back. And you can, and at first he's like, this is amazing, deaf people will be able to hear because you can take sound and turn it into a vibration, your brain will figure it out. And then, he announced this in the TED Talk in 2015, snore, nothing happens. And then I'm saying the timing of this is, in my own mind, related to like Ready Player One, where the guy puts on this vest and then people his girlfriend's touching his chest and you could see it lighting up and everything, and people are like, oh, games, I want that, It's like, so suddenly the same games that are driving every other kind of technology, it's like, deaf people hearing, meh, virtual sex, all right, all the money goes right in there, and then you can sort of back it off and use it to help deaf people hear. And I kind of think that's the HoloLens, that's the same experience, right? Like, how much would you pour into the ability to have blind people walk around and have some sort of ability to sense the world around them so they could hear it? That probably, I'm sure that there have been things along those lines, but the HoloLens, that comes for free. It comes right out of the box, and they didn't really even intend it. It was just like, oh yeah, we know how far the distance is, we can make a sound for that, and now you've got Magic Cane.
And in terms of, there's a lot of hype out there, but having seen the Magic Leap demo, I can tell you, I think it's going to be really transformative, because a lot of the problems that you deal with in having a screen mashed onto your face, they've solved through their lightwave technology, which basically creates these virtual objects that are visualized by bouncing light off the back of your retina, so you perceive them as actual objects. So no matter how close you get to a character sitting in your hand, there's no pixelation. And for example, in virtual reality, there's no sense of depth of field. Everything's in focus all the time, which is one of the causes of nausea in virtual reality. But through their lightwave technology, if I'm looking at this little creature, you're all blurred out, and if I'm looking at you, then the little creature's blurred out. So there's this realism there that for people who have been dabbling in this space for a while, you're going to get it instantly. And I think for the general public, they're going to say, well, that's pretty cool. But for all the people who are really interested in the space, you're going to see this as a major sea change.
So one of the companies that talked about the vests makes me think of this. One of the companies that was not on your list of companies was Disney. I mean, Pixar was there, but Disney was not there. And of course, they just announced their vest that will make you feel like a snake is crawling up your body. I would not like that, or like you're being hugged, so it's much friendlier to me. You should add Disney to the list.
They already are on the list, actually.
Okay, I didn't see them.
We're already in conversation with them, both Disney as a corporation and the Imagineering arm, which is focused on theme parks and cruise lines. And so, actually, I just teed up a meeting for Susan to meet with them.
And Disney Research.
Yeah, and actually, our dean of production and he
Design and production,
for design and production, he's ex-Disney Imagineering too. So it's kind of like Disney's in the family, but I didn't put it up there because we haven't formalized any relationship yet, and we're still in the very early stages. But yeah, very interesting what they're doing.
I want that vest.
And from a private industry standpoint, when you think about, thanks for coming, really appreciate it. When you think about what gets the most traction and what gets the most eyeballs in terms of virtual reality and augmented reality, what we've seen is it's Justin Bieber, it's Marvel Comics, and so the brands that people are already familiar with are and people are loyal to is what is attracting the masses in this space. And so for us, when we think about entertainment as a vertical, being able to partner with some of those existing properties will help greatly in terms of distribution.
One of the questions that we were asking before, but like other things that are interesting, the convergence, I'm always interested in the great convergence. So for instance, where AI and robotics and wearables and blockchain and augmented reality and virtual reality come together. Do you think there's anything promising on the horizon that you've seen particularly that has excited you? Or?
Where they all kind of come together?
Well, as an example, like there's this company, and I don't know if it's vaporware, if it's gonna happen or not, but they, the first blockchain-enabled augmented reality system. So you can like look at something and buy it with your eyes. They would have, that you would buy it in like, you know, virtual points or whatever, and controlled by that company probably. And the developer, if they develop something and you want to play that game, you pay them in blockchain points or whatever, and it goes back and forth. That's a weird kind of interesting, possibly dystopian, you know, possibly world-changing combination.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, it makes me think of the electronic arts fiasco of you having to pay extra to be able to unlock all the features or play like 3,000 hours. I don't know if you remember that, but it drove EA's stock down significantly because they were trying to monetize in-app experiences, and so much so that you couldn't arrive at that level without paying the money, without a considerable time investment. What's interesting is, on that same thread, I guess, is what you're going to start to see too, and I know some people working on it, is programmatic advertisements in video games. So one of my old favorite games when I was a kid was Pole Position, if you guys remember that old video game. And you go by some billboards were in pole position as you're playing it. Imagine those billboards changing and people are paying on a per click basis or on a per eyeball basis for every time a car passes by those, and those go on to an ad exchange, just like the ads on the New York Times app or the BBC app or the solitaire game that you like to play on your phone. And so what you might start to see is product placement, like you used to see in 80s movies, start to appear in video games, and that creating a whole market for itself. And that's a kind of a convergence of a lot of different technologies all happening at the same time.
So on that theme, another thing that I'm really noticing is colleges are starting to really pick up on the importance of mindfulness for student health and well-being. And I myself, because I've started doing martial arts, I've started picking up on the practice of mindfulness and finding it really amazingly helpful at achieving goals. Now imagine a platform where you can begin to integrate the goals that you have and mindfulness practices, etc. And so while it may be really attractive to some people to go and get advertised to, and there will certainly be a lot of corporations paying for that,
Sure.
Imagine an app that you could sell to individuals, which basically helps build upon the internal synergies that are very, very hard for a lot of people to access for a variety of reasons, turning them into better achievers than they would be, you know, if they are constantly bombarded by ads. And so there could actually be, and this could also be something that could be some great opportunities for the medical school research world, which is, you know, how do we activate this mind-body connection, which, you know, in many ways has been proven to be very effective at helping generate accomplishment.
Just saw the new med school building design, and there is a media lab and there's a wellness room.
Yeah.
They're currently separated by floors, but they're certainly both.
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting discussion at some point, Brian, to have people brainstorm about what those interconnectivities and combinations of technologies might be that would be useful.
Yeah,
And-
yeah.
And healthcare
If they
and
shared a conference
teaching
room, what would that
everything.
conference room look like?
Yeah. Well, to me, when somebody's, like, every time I start a conversation about this, somebody's like, oh, that sounds like Black Mirror. Have you watched that episode where they, and then it's always like immediately goes towards the dystopian, you know? And I'm by nature an optimist, and my response is, you know, technology always has dual use, the positive and the negative, and I sit in an educational institution that serves health, and I think that those are two positive things that we can work towards. And we think about empowering technology, a lot of it, if you can just move your eyes, if you can just distinguish between two thoughts in your brain without having to move anything else, then you can control an interface that controls a robot and does a job and makes the world a better place, you know. And so there is a lot of empowerment that can come out of it, absolutely.
Or can Google make you a hair appointment while you're doing.
Right. Yeah, and I think that, again, that's marketed at somebody who's like, I don't want to spend 15 minutes to make this hair appointment, but imagine how empowering that is for someone who's deaf.
Yeah.
How would they make that hair appointment? So that's really wonderful, actually.
It is. My mind drifted instantly to the person who the appointment's being made with, and them asking a question that the computer doesn't know how to answer and ending up in some vicious loop.
Right.
And realizing that it's a computer all along, and what would happen in that scenario.
It would only happen once,
Turing test.
said the optimist.
I've been in those loops in the DMV.
With a real person.
With a real person.
A real person. So these events, we often have like the sort of a networking component and a presentation component. Whenever you're done taking questions, we can move into the networking component of it.
I'm done whenever everyone else is done. Happy to, I'm not going anywhere too, so I'm happy to chat one-to-one as well.
You could stop recording if you're.
Oh yeah, we'll stop the recording. All right, thanks very much.
I saw that demo, that's a pretty nice demo.
Which one?
Great to try and figure out when to bring into this room would be people from the J School. In some